They said no helicopter could survive the storm raging over the Alcadir Valley. But Captain Laura McKinley had never listened to no. When hundreds of Marines called for help, she lifted her Chinook into a sky already burning red, and flew straight into the kind of fire that kills legends or creates them. If you believe courage like this should never be forgotten, hit the like button, and subscribe to hear more real stories of ordinary heroes who refuse to back down. The valley was choking on smoke and dust. Every ridge burned with gunfire, every echo was a scream of metal against stone. The Marines had dug themselves into the shallow cover of ruined mud walls, their faces streaked with grime and exhaustion. 5 hours of continuous shelling had turned the Alcadir Valley into a bowl of chaos, no air cover, no supplies, no escape route left open. The radio operator of Bravo Company shouted over the noise, "Command, this is Bravo 1. We are pinned. Request immediate evacuation. Repeat, immediate evacuation." The only answer was static. Sergeant David Hawk Hawkins crouched behind a crumbling wall, his M4 hot from constant firing. He glanced down at the handful of ammunition left in his vest. "We're running dry," he muttered. His men, what was left of them, looked to him for direction. One of them, Corporal Stenner, asked, "Sir, what if the birds can't make it through?" Hawk gave a thin smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Then we hold until they do." A mortar landed nearby, shaking the ground and covering them in dust. The radio sparked again, broken voices, distorted by interference. "Command, repeat, all aircraft grounded, visibility 0. Hawk slammed his fist against the dirt. Damn it. Around him, the valley lit up with tracer fire from the ridges. The insurgents were tightening their circle, waiting for the Marines to run out of bullets. 60 miles away, in a sand-swept hangar at Forward Operating Base Archer, Captain Laura McKinley was cleaning her flight helmet when she heard the transmission come through. The comms officer frowned at the flickering screen. "They're trapped in the Alcadir sector," he said quietly. "Command's considering a ground push." Laura looked up, brow furrowed. "Ground push? That'll take 6 hours. They don't have 6 hours. The officer didn't respond, just shook his head and turned back to the console. Outside, the sky was bruised with dust and lightning. The wind howled across the runway, sweeping sand like waves. Every pilot knew that no helicopter could fly safely through that storm, not and make it back in one piece. Laura set her helmet down, staring at the wall map. A red marker blinked over the valley. 580 Marines, she whispered. God. Her co-pilot, Vega, walked in holding 2 cups of coffee. "You hearing that mess on the comms?" Laura nodded slowly. "Yeah. And nobody's moving." Vega glanced out toward the runway, watching the sand whip against the hangar doors. "You thinking what I think you're thinking?" Laura didn't answer. She simply looked at the storm, the way it swallowed the horizon whole. Somewhere beyond that wall of dust, hundreds of soldiers were waiting for a miracle that wasn't coming. She closed her eyes for a brief moment, then turned toward the hangar lights flickering above. "Patch me through to command," she said quietly. "I want to know who's flying rescue for Alcadir." The officer hesitated. "No one yet, ma'am." Laura's jaw tightened. "Then that's a problem." The command center was a storm of noise, radios buzzing, officers shouting coordinates, and screens flickering with shifting sand patterns that made the valley look like a living, breathing thing. Major Tom Reynolds stood at the center, hands gripping the edge of the operations table. "Visibility's down to 20 feet, he muttered. "Every bird that's tried to lift in that zone has turned back. We're not losing another aircraft tonight." His words were sharp, final, until a voice broke through the chaos. "I'll take it." Heads turned. Captain Laura McKinley stood in the doorway, helmet under her arm, eyes calm and steady. The room fell silent except for the low hum of the generators. Reynolds looked up, disbelief flashing across his face. "McKinley, this isn't up for debate." "With respect, sir," she said evenly, "there's no one else volunteering." Reynolds exhaled heavily, pinching the bridge of his nose. "You remember Kandahar, don't you?" His tone softened. 3 years ago. Unauthorized extraction, wrong coordinates, 2 men injured, 1 still in recovery. You almost lost your wings. Laura didn't flinch. And I didn't lose them, sir. You reinstated me because you said sometimes the rules can't save lives. That was before we were flying blind into a sandstorm, he snapped. Her voice stayed calm. Sir, I know the terrain. I've flown that corridor 6 times this month. I can get them out. For a long moment, the only sound was the static on the radio. Outside, the wind howled like something alive. Reynolds finally looked up at her again, his eyes tired. If you go, you're on your own. No backup, no escort, no recovery unit. You understand me? Laura nodded once. Understood. Behind her, Vega stepped forward, fastening her flight harness. Guess that means I'm on my own too, she said, forcing a half-smile. Reynolds didn't argue, he knew better than to try. As they walked toward the hangar, the lights flickered, cutting in and out with the gusts. The storm outside was like a curtain of brown fire. The air smelled of jet fuel, oil, and dust. Mechanics were strapping down equipment, shouting over the wind. One of them called out, "You're not seriously flying into that, are you?" Vega grinned back. We'll be fine, she's got a stubborn streak. Inside the cockpit, Laura slid into the pilot's seat. The familiar hum of the Chinook systems came alive beneath her fingertips. The windshield was already streaked with dust, visibility near zero. Vega settled beside her, flipping switches and reading out diagnostics. Engines green. Fuel tanks topped. Radio link unstable, but holding. Laura adjusted her headset, staring into the murky storm beyond the hangar doors. Once we're airborne, there's no turning back, she said quietly. Vega's tone was steady. Wasn't planning to. The hangar doors began to open, sand whipping through the gap like smoke. The Chinook's twin rotors thundered to life, blades slicing the air. Laura took a deep breath, eyes narrowing. Angel 9 lifting off, she said into the mic. The Chinook rose into the storm like a steel ghost, swallowed almost instantly by the raging wall of sand. The moment the wheels lifted off the ground, the world turned into a blur of orange and brown, the horizon erased. Visibility dropped to nothing. Laura gripped the controls tightly, feeling every tremor in the yoke as the wind slammed against the fuselage. The sound was deafening, rotor blades screaming against the gusts, metal rattling, warning lights flickering across the console like dying fireflies. Vega's voice came through the headset, calm but clipped. Altitude steady at 600. Instruments fluctuating. Crosswinds gusting at 70 knots. Copy, Laura replied, eyes locked on the flickering radar. It was nearly useless, the sandstorm scrambling every signal. The Chinook lurched sideways as another gust slammed its side. She corrected instinctively, muscle memory overriding fear. Keep her level, she muttered to herself. Just keep her level. Outside, lightning cracked through the sky, a brief flash of white that illuminated the swirling chaos. For a split second, Laura saw the shape of the desert below, then darkness again. Vega adjusted the stabilizer. Storm cell density increasing. Command's probably lost our signal by now. They'll hear us again when we're done, Laura said softly. The turbulence grew worse, shaking the entire airframe. A loose wrench clattered across the floor behind them. Warning tones echoed in her ears, engine pressure drop, navigation error, terrain alert. Laura silenced them one by one. We're fine, she said, more to herself than anyone else. We're fine. Through the haze of sand, a memory surfaced, her father's voice, steady and sure, from years ago. She was 12, sitting in the open door of his old Huey helicopter at an airfield in Texas. He'd handed her his flight gloves, saying, "Courage doesn't wait for orders, Laura. It waits for moments." She hadn't understood it then. Now, flying blind into a storm that could rip the bird apart, she finally did. Vega caught her expression. You good up there? Laura nodded, her jaw tight. Just thinking about home. The Chinook climbed higher, trying to break through the worst of the storm. Each meter felt like pushing through a wall of stone. The altimeter spun wildly, sand lashed at the windshield like bullets. Visibility, 2 feet, Vega called out. Radar ghosting. No ground readouts. Then we trust the instruments, Laura said. And a little luck. The storm roared louder, a living thing trying to swallow them whole. Every instinct screamed to pull back, but Laura's hands never wavered. She nudged the throttle forward, coaxing the engines higher, ignoring the red warnings blooming across the display. Lightning forked across the sky again, washing the cockpit in blue light. And then, suddenly, the resistance eased. The Chinook broke through the top of the sand wall into a pocket of eerie calm. The clouds glowed faintly gold in the distance, the storm still boiling beneath them. Vega let out a slow breath. We're through. Laura didn't smile. She just whispered, not yet. The valley floor was hell on earth. Every few seconds, the night exploded with the thunder of mortars. The Marines had dug into whatever cover they could find, craters, broken vehicles, shallow ditches that filled with dust and blood. Smoke rolled across the ground so thick that shapes looked like ghosts until they moved. The air stank of cordite and burning oil. Sergeant David Hawk Hawkins crouched behind a scorched Humvee, firing short bursts toward the ridgeline. The enemy's tracers cut through the haze like red lightning. Keep the perimeter tight, he shouted over the chaos. Watch your sectors and conserve ammo. A young Marine scrambled beside him, dragging a wounded man by the shoulders. He's hit bad, Sarge. Hawk grabbed a tourniquet from his vest and tightened it around the soldier's leg. You'll be fine, kid, he muttered, though his voice cracked. He looked up toward the ridge, muzzle flashes everywhere. They were surrounded. Command, this is Bravo 1. Hawk yelled into his radio. We're under heavy fire. Request evac, any air support, do you copy? The speaker hissed back nothing but static. He tried again, switching frequencies. Still nothing. Around him, the ground shook as another mortar landed too close, showering them with dirt. Someone screamed. Someone else was praying under their breath. Hawk gritted his teeth and looked at his men, faces streaked with grime, eyes wide and hollow. He knew that look. They were running out of time. Then, faint through the static, came a voice. Calm. Clear. Female. Hawk, this is Angel 9. I see your flares. Hold the line. For a moment, he thought he imagined it. He pressed the earpiece tighter. Say again? This is Angel 9. I've got eyes on your position. Hold your flares steady and mark your landing zone. The Marines froze. Someone shouted, was that air support? Hawk's pulse spiked. Angel 9, we've been pinned for hours, what's your distance? Close enough, she replied. Hawk stood, peering through the smoke at the dark sky above the ridges. He couldn't see anything yet, just the storm swirling overhead. But he believed that voice. He didn't know who she was, but she sounded like someone who didn't flinch. All right, you heard her. Hawk shouted. Pop green smoke and hold position. Let's give her something to land on. Marines scrambled, tossing canisters into the air. Green plumes rose through the haze, glowing faintly under the flashes of explosions. The next mortar landed close enough to lift Hawk off his feet. He hit the ground hard, ears ringing. He crawled to the radio again. Angel 9, conditions are bad, LZ's hot. I don't know how you're gonna land in this. Leave that to me, came the reply. He could barely hear her over the screaming wind, but something in her tone steadied him. Hawk looked toward the ridgeline, smoke and fire blending into one endless blur. Somewhere above, through the storm and chaos, help was coming. The first thing Laura saw as she broke through the final curtain of dust was fire, dozens of orange flashes lighting up the valley floor like a storm trapped inside the earth. Her instruments screamed with proximity alerts, warning her of missile locks and incoming heat signatures. The Chinook bucked hard as the wind shifted. We're coming in hot, she shouted over the roar of the engines. Vega was already at the right side gun, helmet visor down, hands gripping the handle. Copy that. I've got movement on the ridge, multiple launchers. Laura's voice was calm but tight. Keep them busy. I'll thread us through. The desert below was chaos. She could see the Marines, tiny figures firing from behind debris, green smoke rising from their flares. Tracer rounds arced upward, desperate and bright. Then came the streak of light, an RPG spiraling toward them like a comet. Incoming! Vega yelled. Laura jerked the stick, rolling left. The missile skimmed under their tail and exploded in the distance. The Chinook jolted, alarms blaring. Angel 9 taking fire, Laura said into the mic, multiple hostiles on both ridges. Static hissed in reply. Command was gone again. They were flying blind, talking only to each other. Vega leaned out and opened up with the gun, the heavy thump-thump-thump of rounds shaking the aircraft. Suppressing left flank, she shouted. Below, men cheered as her tracers tore through the enemy's position. A second rocket shot up, this one faster, closer. Laura didn't have time to evade. It slammed into the tail boom, rocking the helicopter violently. The cockpit filled with alarms. Red lights flashed across the console. Vega stumbled back, catching herself on the gun mount. Tails hit, she cried. Laura's hands moved fast, instincts overriding panic. She cut throttle, adjusted collective, fighting to keep the Chinook balanced. Hydraulics? Still responding. Vega shouted back. The aircraft shuddered, pitching forward. For a split second, Laura saw the ground spinning toward them, fire, smoke, men running. Then she pulled hard on the controls, forcing the helicopter to level out. The Chinook steadied, wobbling but alive. We're good, she muttered, sweat dripping down her temple. We're good. The valley roared beneath them. Marines waved flares and fired into the smoke. Hawk's voice broke through the static. Angel 9, you're a sight for sore eyes. Laura took a quick breath. Keep your perimeter clear, Hawk. We're coming down. She descended fast, dust swirling up in violent spirals as the rotors churned the air. Vega fired one last burst at the ridge before locking her harness. LZ marked, let's bring them home. The Chinook's skids slammed into the dirt. The whole frame groaned, but it held. Marines rushed forward, waving and shouting through the dust cloud. Vega swung the side door open, covering them with the gun as they poured in. Explosions thundered nearby, rattling every bolt in the fuselage. Through the chaos, Hawk's voice rose above it all, we've got our ride. The men cheered, because against every odd, the Angel had landed. The Chinook's ramp hit the dirt, and a stream of Marines clambered aboard, mud-caked, wide-eyed, clutching their rifles. Hawk was last to jump in, shouting over the rotors, that's everyone we can fit. Laura glanced back from the cockpit. The cargo bay was a wall of bodies and gear, men packed shoulder to shoulder. Vega gave a thumbs up, yelling, we're at max load, Captain. Any more and we'll scrape the ground. Laura nodded and pulled up on the collective. The Chinook strained, groaning like a living thing. The desert floor fell away inch by inch. Below them, hundreds more Marines waved, still pinned under fire. The weight of what she was leaving behind dug into her chest harder than any G-force. Command, this is Angel 9, she called, voice rough. We've got 30 souls aboard. Returning to base for first drop. Static crackled, then Reynolds' voice came through, sharp and clipped. Negative, Angel 9. You are to abort further flights. Repeat, abort. The valley's compromised. Laura gritted her teeth, eyes fixed on the altimeter. Say again, sir. You've done enough. We'll send reinforcements at dawn. Dawn? Vega snapped. They won't last an hour down there. Laura didn't answer. The Chinook cleared the ridge, the burning valley shrinking behind them. She could still see flashes of gunfire, still hear faint pops through the radio. Every instinct screamed at her to turn back. When they reached safer airspace, she banked toward base. The men inside were silent now, clutching their helmets. One of them finally muttered, "Ma'am, there's still 500 more of us down there." Laura exhaled, steady and deliberate. "I know." The landing pad at the forward base came into view, chaotic with medics, smoke, and blinking landing lights. She touched down hard, and the Marines scrambled out, shouting thanks, slapping the fuselage as they went. Before the rotors had even stopped, Vega leaned forward. "Captain, you're not thinking." "I'm going back," Laura said flatly. Vega blinked. Reynolds said. Laura switched off the comm for a second, letting the silence fill the cockpit. "If we wait, they die. Simple math." She turned the radio back on. "Command, Angel 9 ready for second load." Reynolds' voice snapped back instantly. "Negative." "That's an order." Laura's reply came low, steady, unshakable. "You can court-martial me later. Right now, we fly." For a long moment, there was nothing but static. Then Vega's voice broke it. "Guess we're all in, huh?" Laura gave a thin smile. "You're free to get out." Vega grinned back. "And miss this?" "Not a chance." The Chinook lifted again into the black sky, rotors cutting through smoke and tracer fire. Below, the valley still burned, alive with chaos, need, and faith. This wasn't strategy anymore. It was something deeper, heavier. Duty, maybe. Or defiance. Either way, Angel 9 was going back for them. At forward base Echo, the air was thick with static and disbelief. Technicians crowded around the comms desk, straining to hear through the storm's interference. Reynolds paced like a caged bull, barking into the mic, "Angel 9, return to base immediately." "That's a direct order." No reply came, only the hollow hum of open air. In the corner of the operations tent, Lieutenant Grant Lawson stood silently, headset hanging around his neck. His own Chinook sat grounded on the tarmac, its engines cooled and idle. He'd always been Laura McKinley's rival, the rule follower, the textbook pilot, the one who called her reckless after that rescue 3 years ago. But now, hearing the chaos in her voice, the shuddering in her transmission, something shifted inside him. "Sir," he said, stepping forward, "she's still out there." Reynolds didn't even glance at him. "She's disobeying orders. She'll burn out her rotors before she gets half those men out." Lawson stared at the blinking radar, one lone signal flickering in the storm. Angel 9. Every blip of interference looked like a heartbeat. "Permission to assist." "Denied." Reynolds snapped. "I can't lose 2 birds tonight." Lawson nodded slowly. "Understood." Then he turned on his heel and walked out. Minutes later, his boots hit the metal ramp of his Chinook. His co-pilot, Diaz, blinked in surprise. "We're launching?" "We didn't get the green light." Lawson strapped into his seat, eyes cold and clear. "We don't need one." The turbines roared to life, blades slicing through the haze. As the Chinook lifted, dust spiraled around the base like smoke from an awakening beast. Over the radio, Vega's voice crackled faintly. "Angel 9 to any Allied aircraft, where the hell are you guys?" Lawson keyed in, voice calm and steady. "This is Ghost 2. I'm right behind you." A stunned silence, then Laura's laugh, half disbelief, half relief. "You always did hate paperwork. Let's just say I'm revising my opinion of you, McKinley." Through the storm, their twin rotors became 2 thunderous heartbeats in rhythm. They dove low through tracer fire, the ground a canvas of orange streaks and chaos. Vega shouted targets, Diaz returned fire. As they broke into the valley, Laura's Chinook was already kicking up dust, her landing lights cutting through the smoke. Hawk's voice echoed on the radio, "Angel 9, we've got more wounded ready. Hurry." Laura glanced sideways, spotting Lawson's bird banking in beside her. "We lift together," she said. "Copy that," he answered. The 2 Chinooks touched down almost in unison, ramps slamming open. Marines surged toward them under a rain of bullets. Vega and Diaz laid suppressing fire, tracer rounds carving fiery arcs across the night. Loads secure. Hawk's voice rang out. On my mark, Laura said. 3, 2, 1, lift. Engines screamed as both aircraft rose, synchronized, rotor wash mixing with gunfire. Above the burning valley, for one perfect moment, two rival pilots flew like ghosts in formation, bound not by orders, but by something stronger. The Chinook sat on the battered landing zone like a wounded animal, dust swirling around the skids. Inside, the cargo bay was quiet for the first time since the rescue began. Marines slumped against walls, breathing hard, eyes wide from adrenaline and exhaustion. Laura checked the fuel gauge again, barely enough for one more sortie. Every fiber of her body screamed to turn back, but she shook her head. We're not done yet, she muttered. Vega leaned against the bulkhead, one hand pressed to her side where shrapnel had grazed her shoulder. She grimaced but shook her head. I'll survive. Just, let's get the last ones out first. Laura's jaw tightened. The engines groaned as she tested the throttle. One of the warning lights blinked red, the right engine was sputtering. She glanced at Vega. How bad? Intermittent. But it's holding. Barely. Laura nodded. Then it's now or never. Over the radio, Hawk's voice crackled in, tense but calm. Sarge, I'm volunteering to stay behind with a small team to cover this final extraction. They need suppressing fire while you lift the rest. Laura's heart tightened. Hawk, you don't have to. I do, he said firmly. It's my men down there. I'm not letting them die waiting for a miracle. Laura swallowed hard, her throat tight. Her voice broke slightly when she spoke into the mic no Marine left behind. Not this time. The men who remained on the valley floor braced themselves, weapons at the ready, green flares still glowing faintly through the haze. Explosions punctuated the night, the enemy still pressing from the ridges. Every second was a heartbeat closer to disaster. Laura swung back into the cockpit, hands moving over the controls with precision born of years in the air. She adjusted the collective and cyclic, coaxing the heavy bird into the wind. Vega clicked her headset on, scanning the ground for threats. LZ is marked. No surprises yet. The Chinook lifted slowly, almost reverently, dust and debris tumbling beneath it. Below, Hawk's small team opened fire, tracer rounds cutting bright arcs through the darkness, keeping the enemy at bay. Laura kept her eyes forward, heart pounding, every muscle tense as she navigated the narrow corridor back to the Marines still trapped in the valley. Lightning flickered across the horizon, illuminating the jagged ridges, the haze, and the enemy positions. The rotors thumped like war drums. Every bump of turbulence made the Chinook groan, but Laura refused to falter. Vega's fire suppressed the insurgents, shouting coordinates and threats through the wind. Minutes stretched like hours. Then, finally, the Marines at the far end of the valley began sprinting toward the landing zone, weapons slung, eyes locked on the helicopter. Laura guided the Chinook down, every movement precise, careful, alive with urgency. The ramp slammed to the ground, and men poured in. Vega covered them with fire while Laura fought to stabilize the struggling aircraft. Hawk's team held the line below, shouting encouragement and firing relentlessly. As the last of the Marines climbed aboard, Laura exhaled, a shudder running through her body. She looked at Vega, who nodded back, battered but alive. One more time, Laura whispered to herself, before lifting into the dark sky. The night had swallowed the valley, leaving only the glow of tracer fire and the flickering green flares marking the landing zone. The last group of Marines sprinted toward the Chinook, dust and smoke trailing behind them like ghosts. Laura's hands were tight on the controls, her knuckles white, eyes scanning the ridge above for movement. Every second felt stretched, elastic with tension, as the storm of gunfire and mortars continued. Vega leaned against the side gun, firing in controlled bursts, shouting over the roar of the engines. Left ridge. Incoming RPGs. Laura twisted the cyclic, banking sharply, just as a mortar slammed into the slope beside them. The impact sent a shockwave through the fuselage, rattling every bolt. Warning lights screamed across the console. One rotor had been struck, its hydraulic system failing. The Chinook wobbled violently, teetering on the edge of control. "We're losing a rotor," Vega yelled, gripping the gun mount for balance. Laura's jaw tightened. She could feel the vibrations travel up through the controls, through her hands, her arms. Instinct took over. Years of flying, of surviving impossible odds, boiled down to this single moment. Her voice was calm, almost quiet in the chaos. "Not yet." Below, Hawk's remaining team continued to fire, keeping the enemy pinned. Tracers cut arcs through the night, lighting the darkness like fireworks in reverse. Explosions from mortars hitting the ridges lit the valley in jagged bursts of orange and red. Each blast shook the ground, and the Chinook, with terrifying force. Vega called out again, voice tense. "Altitude dropping, Captain. We're losing airspeed." Laura adjusted the collective, coaxing every ounce of lift from the failing rotor. The aircraft shuddered, listing to the side, but she kept her eyes forward. The Marines climbing aboard shouted encouragement, their faces wide with fear and hope. The ramp slammed shut behind the last of them, the cargo bay packed to the brim. The valley erupted behind them as mortars struck again. Dust, debris, and fire shot upward, the explosions silhouetting the ridges in a hellish glow. Laura guided the Chinook forward, every movement precise, every decision razor-sharp. Vega continued to fire, covering their ascent as the failing rotor protested with grinding alarms. "We're barely holding, Captain," Vega yelled. "I know," Laura whispered, focusing on the horizon. The valley below was chaos incarnate, flames licking the mountainsides, smoke curling into the night sky, but they were still moving. Slowly, agonizingly, the Chinook gained altitude, clearing the ridge. The moment they passed over, the valley behind them exploded in a final, fiery tableau. Laura exhaled, muscles aching, sweat streaking her face. Vega lowered her gun, eyes wide, catching her breath. "Made it," Vega said quietly. Laura's gaze didn't leave the horizon. The valley had turned red, alive with fire and fury, but the Marines were safe, the impossible load lifted into the night. She allowed herself a single, brief nod. "Not yet," she muttered again, this time in relief more than defiance. Above them, the storm seemed to settle, though the night remained alive with distant echoes of gunfire. For one fleeting moment, the sky itself had turned red, and they had flown through it. The first light of dawn spilled over the desert horizon, painting the sand in shades of gold and crimson. The air was still, almost reverent, as the battered Chinook, Angel 9, descended toward the base. Its rotors churned the dusty ground, kicking up wisps of sand that hung in the air like smoke. Every soldier on the tarmac turned as the helicopter touched down, metal groaning under the weight of exhaustion and the lives it carried. 580 Marines stood in silence, faces smeared with dirt, grime, and sweat, but eyes wide with relief and awe. Some still clutched their rifles, others slumped against one another for support. The sheer magnitude of survival was heavy in the air, as though everyone collectively held their breath. Major Reynolds stepped forward first, his face unreadable, hands tightening into fists before relaxing. He saluted sharply, crisp and precise. "Outstanding work, Captain McKinley," he said, voice rough with emotion and relief. Beside him, Lieutenant Grant Lawson watched quietly, shoulders stiff. The usual arrogance in his posture had vanished, replaced by something quieter, respect. His eyes followed every movement of the helicopter, the rotors still spinning, battered but unbroken. Hawk approached slowly, boots crunching on the sand. His gaze locked on Laura as she unstrapped herself from the cockpit, pulling the helmet from her head. Sweat streaked her face, streaks of dust blending with the early sunlight. Hawk's voice caught in his throat for a moment as he recognized her features, the strong jaw, the determined eyes. Then it clicked. Your father's daughter," he said softly, awe threading his tone. Memories of the man who had saved him years ago surfaced, connecting past courage to this moment. Laura's eyes met his, a faint smile touching her lips despite the exhaustion. She stepped fully onto the tarmac, shoulders heavy, chest rising and falling with each labored breath. The Marine's silence stretched as she finally spoke, voice steady yet intimate. My father brought one man home. Today, she paused, scanning the crowd, letting the weight of the words settle. I brought 580. The pause lingered, then, slowly at first, a ripple of applause began. Hands clapped, boots struck the ground, voices rising in unison, building into a tide of sound that rolled across the field. Relief, gratitude, and respect fused in that spontaneous acknowledgement. The desert itself seemed to hum in response. Laura stepped back, letting the applause wash over her, shoulders sagging as exhaustion finally seeped through. Her eyes lifted to the Chinook. Angel 9 sat there, bullet-riddled, bearing scars of the storm, but still standing, a testament to resilience, precision, and courage. The camera, or the eyes of every Marine watching, traced the lines of the aircraft, the beaten fuselage, the rotor blades slowly slowing. It was more than a helicopter now. It was a symbol, a declaration that courage didn't wait for orders, that defiance in the right moment could change the course of countless lives. Laura exhaled, a small, quiet laugh escaping her lips as she allowed herself to rest. Around her, the applause continued, echoing across the desert, marking the end of one impossible mission, and the legacy of a pilot who refused to leave anyone behind. If you were inspired by Captain Laura McKinley's courage and the incredible story of Angel 9, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel for more real-life heroism, jaw-dropping rescues, and stories that prove courage doesn't wait for orders. Hit the bell icon so you never miss an epic mission.